So this is usually the part of the podcast where I let the music play out, we settle in, and I introduce our guests. But I feel like this being the first episode in close to 2 months, I wanted to give you guys an update on what's been going on in my life. So earlier in March, I accepted a promotion in my day job, which, as many of you may have guessed, means a deeper and more time consuming commitment availability wise. Is it something I enjoy doing? No, but it has given me the opportunity to save up more, to put away more money for any future endeavors that weren't previously available to me. That being said, I am not abandoning this podcast. What I want to do is eventually return to weekly uploads. But for the time being, the more realistic goal is about 2 episodes per month, so making it more of a monthly thing. This also really depends on the availability of the guests that I've reached out to. And what I've noticed that is with things opening up more and more, people have thankfully been more busy, active, and maybe a bit harder to get a hold of as compared to previous months. So to my listeners, thank you so much for sticking by me. This has been a great opportunity for me. I enjoy bringing to you guys different stories, ideas, and backgrounds to explore. I really, really do. None of it is lost on me. And so I really, really appreciate all the support that I've been getting. With that being said, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode. The last time we saw each other, I think was when you had pulled up to, this was a couple, I don't know, it was 2018 or 2017, but it was a pivotal moment because the last time I saw you, other than jam sessions or whatnot, you came up in your truck and you handed me a copy of Project One. You remember that?
Yeah, I do remember.
Yeah, and then I asked you to do something funky. I asked you to sign that thing too, just cause like I thought it was so dope that you recorded these tracks and you'd put them on a disc. And it's just like, this is something people don't really share with each other anymore. So kind of let's go back to then. What was that whole process like, and how did you find? I know music's a thing of the past. No, see, I already see it with you. It's kind of like, man, he's talking about my past, but that was my first impression of you. So like, during that, through all that, like, how did that come about?
Man, so if I'm remembering back, so I was real dedicated jazz musician, and I wanted to do a record that took some of the hymns, like the old church hymns, and looked like a modern flair, put a jazz sound to it. And that was my my first project. It was I recorded at Studio D in Summitville. R.I.P. to Daryl. He was a great person to record with, and Kyron Montero mixed and mastered the record. So it was a cool experience, man. I learned a lot, and really helps me out in the rest of my life. So
yeah, because I feel like with that experience of just you being at the helm of producing something, that kind of maybe kickstarted a side of you that hadn't maybe either been there before or you just never tried before. Because up until that point, you were, like you said, you were a very dedicated jazz musician. You were, man, you were one of those people, Dan, that when I play around you or when I'm around you, I feel like I get better. If I talk to you, you're one of those guys that you emit that kind of energy. And up until that point, you were a jazz student. You had just gotten back from Chicago, and I just love the story of the album of that EP, how it came about. Like, even the way that it was titled, it was something that it was your response to a professor. So kind of explain the backstory of that.
Man, I ain't told that story in such a long time, man. So basically, watching the movie Whiplash.
I'm so sure. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, man. So I was living a real whiplash situation.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? Is my professor, man, was cussing me out on the daily. You know what I'm saying? It was one of those situations, and I just got married at the time, and I told my wife, like, I can't take this no more. I'm about to quit. I was getting my master's in jazz studies on a full ride scholarship, and we had just moved up there to the Chicago area, and I told her, like, yo, I can't take this no more. So we just moved. We packed up the whole apartment, man. I broke the lease, had to pay that whole thing, rented a U-Haul, and drove back and moved back in with my parents, man. And it was a crazy experience. So out of all that trauma and all that situation, man, it birthed the idea, this Project One. Basically, it was a play on words, right? So it was my first project, so project one, but it also was the only assignment that I actually did at the school was project one, and then how the professor had an accent and the way he pronounced project
Gotcha.
one sounded like how I spelled it. That's why it's a
Hmm.
crazy learning experience, man.
So you mentioned the movie Whiplash, and it's for a lot of people. They've seen that. A lot of people have seen it. It's a movie. It's a great film, but in terms of how it captures the music school scene, and there's so many things I've seen that other musicians have said that have kind of addressed the things the movies bring about. I think one of the biggest elephants in the room with that movie is just the style of that kind of drumming in particular. Not to say that it maybe coincided with you in any way, but how how much of that movie holds validity to your experience? Because depending on who you went with and who is your instructor, it many different musicians have a different reaction to it. A lot of people I saw, never had that kind of experience. Their professors were very understanding, but you seem to have lived it, and in a
Yeah,
way, it did kind of grow you. It grew you tremendously, throughout it. But
definitely.
what's your response to the
Yeah, man.
film? Yeah,
So, I mean, it wasn't as extreme. Like my professors weren't throwing stands at me. You know what I'm
gotcha.
saying?
Yeah, yeah.
That kind of crazy stuff. But as far as like the mental and like verbal abuse, man, that was definitely realistic, man. For school, man, jazz school, man. It's just one of those things, man. Like you know, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, man. Everybody doesn't learn the same way. So
Hmm.
that might motivate some people to really get down and get going. You know what I'm saying? But for me, I wasn't, you know what I'm saying? Especially coming from a Christian school. And I mean, I wasn't used to people just professors straight cussing you out, you know what I mean? And I wasn't cool. I mean, it was almost like, what you would imagine like a division one basketball team to be. That's how they was treating it, you know what I mean? So it
Hmm.
really took the fun out of like learning about music and evolving.
All right. Why, if you don't mind me asking a little further before we maybe move on from it, why do you think he was cussing you out like that? Why did it seem like he was singling you out in any way, or was his did he just not quote unquote vibe with you? Was it more of a tough love situation from him, or was that just literally how he was and how he
Man,
is to every student?
that's just how he was, man. It's one of those things that um again, I related back to sports. When you go visit, you know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
Everybody's just kind of like, oh yeah, happy, great to have you, you know what I mean?
And when you
And
get
then
on the
like
team.
lesson one, man, we were reading. Oh yeah, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Lesson one, man, we were reading down a chart, and I'll never forget, I misplaced the eighth note. Yeah, I just missed one section where I misplaced the eighth note, and he stopped me and just like called me every name in the book, like, you don't ever belong here. That right. It was that like that, man. And now I was like, man, this is wild. And I mean, why is he treating me? I just missed one, like literally one eighth note, man. It was like some hits in the
Hmm.
chart, and I missed one. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, and that was the experience for music school, but in life, man, like now that I was like, I'm a boss of other people. You know what I'm saying? I try not to treat people who are quote unquote under me like that. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that really helped me learn to not when somebody's messing up, it's like, okay, what am I doing wrong? Or how can I help you evolve instead of, you blank, 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 you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Well, it kind of speaks to the level that you were trying to get to. At the time, you were trying to elevate yourself, and the professor was probably doing what he thought was best. But in your opinion, is that an attitude, and is that a stigma that is reflected across the music industry in general? Is it that competitive to the point? Because with the type of music that you were playing with jazz, there is this feeling, especially when you go. When you go see Bradford Marsalis, or you go see Brian Blade, you go see these artists, they just look so calm. And it probably depends on the artist, but do you feel and like that attitude persists in and around the industry, or is it just kind of case specific?
man, so I obviously I didn't make it up super far in the jazz industry. Um, but I got to like Indianapolis is the closest city to me that has a big jazz scene. I got to where I was playing like regularly, getting gigs,
Mm-hmm.
and what I was realizing, man, the jazz community, man, is very. That's what I'm looking for, man. It's very. I don't know, man. Okay, if I was compared, let's compare it to most people's grandma's church. You know, if you go to your grandma's church
Sure.
and
Yeah.
you got on some jeans with holes in them, you instantly, you know what I'm saying? Like if
Right.
you do
Right.
anything that's not in their normal box, you know, then
Mm-hmm.
it really kind of messes up everything. So the jazz scene is really like that, man. So it's hard to come in as a young person, as a new person, and try to break into those scenes because they have they're really stuck in the ways, and they want you to be like that kind of to be like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say, man, it's the music industry is a beast in and of itself. But then we really narrow it down to just the jazz community, man. It's a whole nother. It's
Right.
a smaller pond, and it's a whole nother kind of beast to tackle.
Yeah. The reason I wanted to ask you those specific questions isn't necessarily just a belabor on your, on the pain that that professor really like caused you, because like that, to uproot, like to even consider uprooting it, like that to me says that like it was up and beyond normal. He crossed the line in ways that we, the public, probably won't ever, probably, hopefully, would never get to experience anything like that. But do you feel like that was one of the first turning points for you to kind of end up where you are now? It definitely is, but like in
Yeah,
what ways did that kind of catapult you into this direction? Because you to kind of, it was a slow, would you say it was kind of a slow process from phasing out from the music portion of your life to the, even like the inklings of where you are now?
man. Like I mean, even after that crazy experience, I had
Mm-hmm.
no intentions on quitting music or
Right.
anything like that. So I moved back, man. I was just going full throttle. But what I realized, so like what I tell you, what really to really wrap the music thing into the whole thing. I
Mm-hmm.
remember, man, I was playing Indianapolis regularly, man, working every weekend, playing gigs, and then I had a kid.
Right.
Then I
Right.
was thinking, like, okay, so I drive to Indianapolis. It takes me an hour and 15 minutes to get there, right? So drive to Indianapolis. The set starts at 10. You play the set from 10 to 1:30. You know what I mean? And then you pack your drums up and you drive back home. So now you're getting home all the nights at 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then most of the realistically, you making between 150 to $250. You know what I'm saying? This is like, and I started like, man, it ended up being not worth the hassle uh financially and like just responsible for my being responsible for my family to keep doing that, man. So that's when I really decided I wasn't gonna do like the gig stuff anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as drums or even like leading worship in church or anything like that, man, I've been doing this, man, since I was 5 years old, man. So I just turned 28, man. So that's 23 years of going hard on drums, man, every single Sunday, every single
Mm-hmm.
day. And it's got to a point, man, it's like, man, that same kind of love that I had for all those years, I mean, from doing the church stuff to spending all those years in the practice room, man, the same kind of love that I had for the drums just wasn't there. So I'm
Right.
like, it's time for me to maybe take all the things that I've learned from music and then that discipline and move it elsewhere. And maybe I mean I still got my drums, you know what I'm saying, but maybe it'll come back someday. But right now, it's that because I tell you what, because it wasn't a hobby, it was because it was my livelihood. That took away the enjoyment of it, I think.
Right. Do you feel like in well, no, I should say this, the experience that you had growing up, right, playing at your grandma's church or growing in that environment, is something I can tell you, Ronnie, a lot of musicians around the world would give their right arm to experience. That
Yeah,
whole, even me, the first time I truly realized how big the world of drumming really was the first time I played at the Downtown Tabernacle. Now, not a
yeah,
church really known for worship, but at the time, our mutual connection was jazz, right?
right.
And by Jasmine Roll.
Shout
Props to
out
him. He
Jasmine.
he out there doing his thing right now, but
Yeah,
just seeing him play and with the kind of stuff he was bringing to the worship, it was the first time, I tell you, it was the first time for me I'd ever experienced the concept of playing out at church.
yeah,
Never before had I considered, because I'm from Thailand. I'm from across the
right.
lagoon. I didn't grow up in the States. They have similar to, different cultures, we have different ways of worship, right? And especially
Yeah,
with music, but it seems like uh, the African American experience as far as the church, if we're talking that scene, um, I feel like it's a hotbed that just fosters some of the greatest musicians
yeah,
in in the country. If you look at who's playing for like the biggest artists, most of these guys come from church. Like, what are your thoughts on that? One of your friends is Aaron Smith, and it's just like, wow, like, again, like, has it dawned on people at all that church is kind of the proving ground for a lot of these people to come
yeah,
through?
man.
It's a
So,
weird
so,
synergy
so
there.
growing up playing in church, man, you get like it's so many experiences that you have. So first of all, you always working on constant ear training, like melodic
Hmm.
and rhythmic. You know what I mean? Because you don't know a lot of times you don't know what's going to happen, and you just gotta be able to catch on to stuff on the spot. Second of all, growing up in the African American church, man, you can go through 10 different styles. You know what I'm saying? All
Hmm.
in the same song. So that makes you like versatile. And then you got to work on dynamics, man. You go to some churches and some of the drum stuff don't work. You got to learn how to improvise around bad equipment. So it's just a really holistic experience with music, man. And you experience some going to some African American churches is like music is like the mecca of the service, you know what I mean? So it's like it's really important, man, and understanding that culture, man, and really being able to. I mean, I really didn't. I tell you the truth, I really didn't understand how pivotal and how important it was until I got to Indiana Wesleyan, man, and start meeting more people from different church cultures. I'm like,
Hmm.
oh wow, man, y'all don't like clap, you know what I'm saying? You don't like clap, you don't clap on, so it's
Right,
a lot of things.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's a lot of things that I just took for granted, you know what I mean, that I didn't realize were, you know, such like big monumental things. But now I mean, it's crazy. I didn't think we were gonna go down this lane. But now if you look across the how churches are moving stylistically with worship, they're all kind of drifting towards that
Right.
African American Pentecostalism sound, right? Everybody wants to
Hmm.
do the spontaneity stuff now. Everybody wants to do that clapping and jumping and stuff. When before nobody was really doing that, and now it's really kind of taking off. You know what I mean?
I think to go off what you said, like the internet has really done so much to kind of
Yeah,
integrate those styles, because like I yeah, like you were saying with just the ear training that you guys were put through to a certain extent, because most musicians, when they learn, it's kind of, Victor Wooten has this amazing speech he gave on TED Talk, right? He talks about how music is a language, and each culture and each part of the world brings a version of that to the forefront,
yeah,
right? But I think the most pure example of that is just how for the most part, how African American churches or that kind of environment fosters growth. Because when you say something about ear training, yeah, if a kid's interested in playing drums, they're not gonna. Okay, my dad would give me the death stare anytime I tap on the drum. As a kid, you run around and you say, "Oh, I really want to try this out," but like there's that barrier. And going back to what Victor Wooten was talking about, amazing bassist who I had the chance to meet on two separate occasions, amazing guy. But he said, music is a language, and you don't just how does a toddler or a baby learn to speak? You speak around him, and that, I feel, is the whole kind of concept of the music and growth that you experience. Like,
yeah,
people spoke at you, people played at you. They didn't say, "Oh, you're not a sorry, I'm lecturing for a little bit, but yeah, you're not you're a baby. You got to go play with other babies before you can play with
right,
me." It's just like
yeah.
kind of like that whole thing is, I've never seen it demonstrated more clearly than when I got to play with a few of the gospel musicians that I was blessed
Yeah,
to play
man. I
with.
mean, like I said, man, I mean, there's positive and negative to it as well, but like I
Hmm.
was playing like on stage, like in church since I was 5, man. So
Hmm.
like I wasn't doing no youth group, no nothing like that, man. I was up in front of everybody, whatever they call it now, big church, you know what I'm saying? I was up in front
Right.
of everybody ever
Yeah.
since I was 5 years old and all the way up until till I was 27, you know what I mean? When I just decided like I'm kind of moving away from this for a while, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, so it really fosters, man, like the
Hmm.
black that's why Black church puts out some of the best musicians because man, people start playing and hearing it at a very young age. And if you want to get up there and learn, it's like a it's really similar to the jazz scene. It's like you can go up there and get cut, you know what I mean? So like for example,
Yeah.
I always tell this story, man. Like I was playing drums one time, and this was at an Indianapolis church, and so it was like a convention type thing. So there was a lot of different churches coming together for an experience, and I happened to be able to get on the drums, man. And when I was playing, there was a local Indianapolis pastor, right? Like who's a killer musician, right? Killer organist, killer and killer at piano too. But he was just in the audience, right? And I was backing up the preacher. So in like the African American church, obviously what that means is when the preacher is preaching, they take that breath, you hitting the stabs between, right? And I missed one, which is this was a big deal. I missed the stab, right? And he just giving this death glare, right?
Oh no.
And then what happens? Well, then you get that little tap on the shoulder like this, and then you off the kit. You know what I'm saying?
No.
And so that's that level. That's that level of cut that happens in church, right? In African American church, and the same thing happens on the jazz scene, right? You messing up, bro. You get the tap on the shoulder, and you off. You off to whatever instrument you on. You know what I mean? So yeah, that really at the time it feels kind of tough. You know what I mean? But really it makes the most incredible musicians, man. But it also helps other aspects of life as well.
The more you describe it, me being kind of at this point, I'm trying to cover martial arts, right? It's a new thing I've been trying to get and be more knowledgeable about it, which is why I was a little late coming to this session. I just come back from jiu-jitsu, but the way African American churches develop musicians is not kind of unlike how Russians or that part of the world, they develop wrestlers. It's just there's one, the raw talent exists, but the way they foster it, it comes from a place of toughness. There's a sort of toughness to it, but with music it's different because you don't most people don't think of music as like a tough kind of breeding love unless you watch something like Whiplash, and it's just like which is I feel. Last point about whole music, man, we could do this for hours, but the goat scooter stuff to me is equally as interesting. But the whole thing with Whiplash, that people tell me, oh, that was such a great movie, had such great music. But my reaction to that is like, the music in Whiplash isn't like the most amazing jazz in my opinion. It's supposed, and I feel like they did that on purpose. I feel like that was purposeful, just to show like, yeah, he has the rudiments down, and by the end of the movie he was killing it, but the soul of the music just didn't exist. And people take that ending of the professor smiling and him smiling at the end is just like, spoilers by the way, sorry, but they take that as a joyful ending, but I don't know about you, but I take that as a dark, like, kind of like what you said, the joy is gone.
That's what happens, man, in music school, man. It's like, so I mean, especially the whole idea of jazz really being studied in school is really, man,
it's challenging.
It's like backwards, man. You know what I'm saying? So what happens is you get a whole bunch of people cranked out of a school that sound like robots, when jazz is really all about, man, really at the end of the day, it's all about community and soul. It's a feeling that people. What happens is when you learn jazz in academia, you don't really encompass the struggle of where it was birthed from. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So jazz was birthed from straight struggle. And now you got these kids coming to school paying $50,000 a year and they're trying to learn about struggle, and it's not the same kind of thing, man. It's all birthed out of pain and struggle, and that music was an expression that the African American community released. And so now I feel like that translation of what the music really is being lost in the academic world.
Yeah. The concept of soul though, right? Because the internet has changed that landscape so much. It's because we're now to the point with this kind of music where you see other communities throwing it back at at America per se, like a band like Dirty Loops, for example, if you know anything about them, man, this the stuff, that those people heard Michael Jackson growing up, they probably listened to a bunch of gospel records or something like that, and they threw it back. Same thing out of Japan, same thing as drummers like JD Beck, for example, is just like, whoa, like how did that kid doesn't come about unless the environment, and one, he's out of Dallas, so, and as according to you a couple posts back, you said something about the Dallas scene being crazy. Yeah, it's stuff like that fosters that growth.
Definitely.
Music thing, man. Oh God, Whiplash. Whenever people talk about Whiplash, it brings, for musicians, I imagine it brings a whole gambit of emotions. But that year, Birdman came out, and people don't know. People really don't know. Like Birdman, Antonio Sanchez played the entire soundtrack.
Yeah, man. On
And
drums, bro.
when
That's
people say
crazy.
Whiplash has the best drumming in a movie, I kind of like not really.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know. All right.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah.
Goat Scooters, the guy you are today, the businessman you are today. Let's take it all the way back to when the first moment you kind of thought you could do it. As far
Mm.
as you've been doing this for a year and a half now, right?
Yeah,
Two
that's about
years.
right. Yep. Started October 2019.
One of the most
Yep.
amazing things I've seen recently is the post you made about uh, how in Marion, uh, about 100 or some time ago, right? It was the very spot that your office was in, or right around the spot that your office was in. You said a black man got lynched. Was the
Yeah.
last time someone got lynched in Marion or in Indianapolis or whatnot.
In the United States, actually, man, that
In
was
the
the
United
last.
States, no way.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
As recognized by the Klan, right, or
It's recognized by the government, like the
by
last,
the
like
government,
actual.
the last
Yeah, yeah,
lynching. What does
yeah.
it mean for you to now have an office in that very spot, in that very like district?
Man, it's a whole wide range of emotions, man. But I really don't even know if I can accurately express or describe what it feels like is,
Mm-hmm.
we came a long way, as far as in that same spot. They drugged the men out of because the jail is right there. They drugged the men out of jail and hung them. You know
Mm.
what I'm saying? Now, on that same square, I'm in the office that's the highest in the whole space. So
Right.
like I really feel like it's an accomplishment, but it's also like, that was in 1930, I believe, man. That's not even 100 years ago. So our town has come a long way, but there's still so much that we can do, man. And so what my whole goal is, man, is to create the culture, man, keep pushing forward, man. And right now I'm trying my best to do that through giving other business owners a chance. I mean, young business owners, um, women, people of color, everybody who will be technically marginalized. I try to give them a chance. So in my same office space, I there's four other offices,
Mm-hmm.
and each office I lease it out to somebody who is either a minority or a woman, just giving people chances, man, uh, that normally wouldn't happen. So now we in the same office space we got people, minorities, and people of and women own the offices all on the same floor. You know what I mean? So it's like my whole goal, man, is to really give the disenfranchised traditionally a chance to really shine in
Mm-hmm.
a city where, I mean, the Klan. I mean, obviously, the Klan's capital or the whole United States is only 30 minutes away in Elwood. You know what I'm saying? So we're in like this Midwest hub where that kind of stuff used to run rampant publicly, and I mean, and now it's probably still running rampant, but it's a little bit more behind the scenes. So my goal is really just to make people see that um, you have more options, man. I help kids out a lot, man. Shout out Youth for Christ, right? I
Mm-hmm.
um I help kids out a lot, and I work with them in the schools. And most kids, man, especially from our area, who look like me, African American, or really any person of color. Um, One day I asked them as an icebreaker, if you wanted to make $1 million, what would you do? And the most common answer that everybody gave was, we can go to the NBA, NFL,
Mm.
MLB, something like that, right? And then the second one, man, was unanimous, right? Everybody said sell drugs, right? And
Mm.
that's their own. And in their mind, coming from where we are, that's their only two options that they have. So my goal is, man, to show them that you can be young black and you do things. We can own businesses and own properties, own land, and be able to do something that is foreign for a city of our size. So now that off and me having that office in that location is all those emotions and all those stories wrapped into one thing.
Yeah. So when you say you as a business owner now, right? You as a boss, you own kind of your own sector of this business. When you say you want to employ the disenfranchised traditionally, and kind of the people who haven't had that opportunity, those kind of opportunities, do you kind of feel like this is a statement that many bigger companies make that don't really believe, and that you're actually now viscerally you have a chance to actually employ that? What kind of what does it mean to you to actually be able to do that? And do you believe that's like, uh, because I asked because it's been made popular. The whole like, oh, we give minorities power.
Yeah.
We give power to those who
everybody,
were
everybody wants
empowered.
to be nice.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So man, I want to be genuine in everything that I do, man. So
Mm-hmm.
I try my best. I might not be perfect all the time, but I try my best. To every company that I have to really be able to give people chances. I mean, it's not like I just look at people and say, oh well, you're white, so you can't work for me. You know what I'm saying? It's not that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like I always give the best person an opportunity, and just thankfully, and most recently, the best people who have had opportunities are sometimes disenfranchised peoples, man. And I just really want everybody to have equity, man. It's what we all. But I feel like I feel like black people have been preaching now for hundreds of years, man. We don't want an unfair shot. We just want an equal shot. We
Right.
want to have equity. And so, coming from small town Indiana, like so, I have some friends who live in the Atlanta area, man, and that's more of like a hub for African Americans and people of color who are really successful.
Mm-hmm.
So when I tell them these stories about like small town Indiana, it's just like foreign. I mean, because like right now, man. So for example, I launched um, my scooters in two cities, and I'm the only black-owned business in the whole city.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of growing, man, a lot of learning, and I'm just trying to do everything I can to really push, the culture forward, and that we can be more than athletes and rappers and
Mm-hmm.
drug dealers. You know what I mean? You can look at us and we can be, the business owners. So that's really one of the things that I'm really passionate about.
It kind of touches on a quote I've seen before. The great Charles Barkley said somewhat the
Yeah,
same thing. He was giving a talk at a school, and then he asked, like, "Hey, you asked how would you want to go about making $1 million?" I think he went to a predominantly African American school, and all the guys were just like, "Oh, NBA," and Charles had this amazing thing. He said it a lot better, but it's kind of like, these people can be doctors too. They can
yeah.
be politicians. They can be some amazing engineers. And it's just like, for me, the question I really truly meant to ask, what does it truly look like to, aside from what you've already said, to bring power to that, uh, to your people per se? Because it's so
Mhm.
much, just looking at your posts and looking at the body of work that you've already produced within a year, man, it takes so much logistics, and just like, similar to how music is cultivated. I feel like to cultivate growth in a community, it's such a massive undertaking. When did you first begin to try to move in that direction? I know you were a worship leader for a little bit after your experience in Chicago, right? And then, yeah. So,
So it's always been so even when I was leading worship, man, my passion was
hmm
I feel like God had called me to build bridges where people have built walls. You know what I'm saying? So when I was leading worship, I was the first black employee of this church that I was at ever. So it would be like me and like 399 white people. You know what I'm saying? And
hmm
they never really had any other interaction with African Americans until they talked to me. So it's like God has really been putting me in these situations over and over again to where I am, you know, trying to bridge gaps that people have built walls. I mean, obviously, if we go back to the worship area, most churches are segregated. You know what I'm saying? That's just like the fact of how things are. And now, as I'm moving into the business world, man, there's not a lot of it's really segregated as well too, man. There's not a lot of African Americans or people of color in small towns or Indiana in general that are really owning businesses and doing all this kind of stuff. Now, I think 2020 made people kind of like wake up and say, "Oh wow, I can just get fired at any time. I guess I can start a business." I
hmm
can, so but things are changing slowly, man. But it's like I want to do everything I can in the small part of the world that I'm in to really encourage people, man, that you have options, man. Like, I mean, if you want to go to the NBA, you can. I mean, the likelihood that you make it is slim, but you know what I mean? But you got options, man. That's what it's all about. So the truth is, man, I never really set out to be this culture like type of person, man.
hmm
God really just put it on my heart from way back when I was I mean, now that I'm putting this together right now with jazz, the music of jazz, man, is all about conversation
Right.
and unity, man. So jazz is one of the first musics, uh, one of the first scenes in music where people were of different races were gathering in America. I mean, segregated and rough and tough as it was in those times, people were coming together and gathering. In church, man, when you study some of the early like Pentecostal movements, man, they were end up getting split up because of racism, man. 'Cause people were intermingling and joining together. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So all these different areas God has put me in is, trying to reconcile people, man, whether that's through jazz music, whether that's through worship, and now in the business area, man, it's really trying to reconcile people, to each other, because I mean, not to get too religious, but like all
Hmm.
these loves, so, like most people, Christians, for example, everybody's focused on the vertical love, you know what I'm saying? But nobody spends any time thinking about their horizontal love. You gotta love
Mm.
one another, man. If we don't have both loves going at the same time, then we're not really showing the true love of Christ.
So what does it look like to try to live out that vision, right? Like the first take me back to the first few steps where you knew things were kind of changing direction a little bit outside of the worship music scene or job that you had, because I remember, just maybe talking with you in the passing and the posts that, social media, it felt like you were there were a couple of moments that you felt, yeah, maybe should I do this? Oh, this sounds like a good idea. Until now, like when when did you first take that step to start the company that you're at now, Goat? Like what?
So,
Yeah, what?
how I get into that? Okay, so,
Hmm.
me and my wife were on a trip to Nashville, Tennessee, and we were staying in the area, at the college, like Vanderbilt area,
Hmm.
and we were trying to get down. I don't know if you've ever been to Nashville. Have you been to Nashville?
I wish one of these
Okay,
days.
so Nashville has a street called Broadway where like everything happens. We
Gotcha.
were like a mile and a half, 2 miles away, and this was like mid June, man. So it's blazing hot. So I started walking. I sweat a lot anyway, and that southern heat is a whole different animal, man.
Yeah.
So 10 minutes, 5 minutes into the walk, I'm drenched, and then I started looking up, and I started seeing these people fly past on these scooters. And the first couple times, I'm like, oh man, people just have some scooters of their own. This was 2018. So this is
18.
still people really still weren't familiar with the whole electric scooter thing at all, let
Hmm.
alone like renting them. So I'm like, man, what's going on, right? So I finally stopped somebody. I'm like, man, how are y'all doing this, right? And he explained, saying, all you gotta do is download the app. You know what I mean? So the company was Bird. So we downloaded the app and rented the scooters, man, and we just rode all night. I don't think we even did nothing else that we were originally going to
Oh,
do.
that's
Yeah, man, we did.
awesome,
I
man.
mean, 'cause it was just so fun. So then the vacation ended. I
Hmm.
came back. I'm like, man, this would be awesome to bring to small town Indiana, because what happens normally is all kind of major innovations like that skip over small towns,
Yes.
and if we do get them, it's like 20 years later or something. You know what I mean?
Right.
After it's already old. So I'm like,
Hmm.
man, what if I could bring that same thing to small town Indiana? So I just started doing research, man, and I came across this company called Goat. Shout out David Naziri. He's the CEO of Goat, and then we'll start working with them, man. And out of that, I birthed Morrell Scooters,
Hmm.
and from there on, to start growing. I started with 6 scooters, man, and as of May 1st, we'll have 71 scooters.
My goodness.
Yeah, man. So
71 scooters. Let's talk about
yeah,
the
man.
day to day, the day to day
Yeah,
life of Ronald Morrell Jr. I see a
yeah.
post saying, something about, um, with the whole blockage in the canal thing that kind of caused a whole bunch of logistical issues. Um,
Right, definitely.
it's wild to think that that colossal trade, like big world trade thing, and it's wonderful to think it affects small businesses like yourself. When was the
Yeah,
first
man.
time when you received the news? Was it like, at what point did you think, oh man, I'm gonna have to maybe drive out to California to get my
It was
stuff?
about so the process of when you order, like usually when you order a
Mm-hmm.
scooter or something like really custom and large, it takes 2 months to develop anyway, like get made. And then I ordered them back in December, and then they were ready to be shipped out February, beginning of February. But with the Chinese, they shut down for Chinese New Year, right? So that was
Right.
like a week and a half of no work. And they finally ready to be shipped out, like the third week of February. So they were supposed to arrive uh, the last week of March, and that's when the whole shipping thing started crumbling apart. Right, this was a little bit before the Suez Canal
Mm-hmm.
blockage, but like there was so much stuff being ordered line that ships were just kind of like hovering, waiting to be able to land. And then the Suez Canal thing happened. Now everything was just shut down. And so at that time, I'm like, man, I already been waiting all this time on the shipment to come via
Mm-hmm.
like cargo at sea. You know what I mean? So then when it lands at sea, then I also got to have a freight, like a land freight company, go out there and get it, and then bring it from California all the way to here. And that's usually like a 2 to 4 weeks wait time. So I'm like, man, if I could just make this California trip, fly out there and then drive back, that'll be 3 to 4 days, and I know I'll have them. I'll be ready to roll. So that's when I kind of made that decision. Like
Gotcha.
sometimes you just
You
gotta
gotta
go and
go
take
get
it.
it.
Yeah,
Right, right.
man. So
And I can
sometimes
think
you get
of
stuck in that situation.
right, and I can think of nothing better as far as, from a marketing perspective. That like if I'm a user of Morrell Scooters, that just makes me want to use this. First of all, Morrell Scooters needs to get to Carmel, Indiana somehow. All right, like
Hey, man. Hey,
it's
let's do
gotta
it,
happen,
man.
man. This story,
Yeah,
it's an amazing. This is a newsworthy story to me. Just the fact that you're willing to go all the way out there for your product. This is stuff that, in my opinion, the most people probably will never get to experience.
yeah,
Just to see business logistics at every single level, from a corporate level, from marketing level, all the way down to just the nitty gritty. You have to drive to each location that the scooters were lost in to go get them. I feel
yeah,
like it's an amazing thing that you've done as far as like to kind of cultivate the culture around Morrell Scooters, and then the technology side of it is actually equally as interesting. The fact
yeah.
that you're trying to cut out the middleman of 20 years and you're trying to bring innovation to these small towns quickly. Kind of
Right.
kind of describe to people that maybe haven't grown up in America or don't know small town America as much. What do you mean when you say small town America and the fact that innovation never really gets in?
Um, small town,
Because
man. Small town America is different in each state. Small
mm-hmm,
town Indiana specifically, because we're in the Midwest, right? So we're kind
mm-hmm.
of almost in like a flyover state. So
I hate when people say that. It feels so
yeah,
bad. Yeah.
that's essentially what it is, man. Like people, there's no reason. I mean, people come to Indianapolis, but other than that, there's no reason to come to Indiana, right? Because there's nothing really else happening. So we kind of get ignored, even from everything from music to fashion to
Mm-hmm.
all kind of stuff. It makes it here the last, like the last. I mean, at very last, we're the last person people to receive, and let's receive that kind of stuff, which is interesting because Chicago's so close,
It's
only
so
3 hours
close by.
away,
Right, right.
and we just kind of get skipped for most of that stuff. So
Yeah.
being from small town Indiana, and as far as like a number to try to describe people who's not from America, I would say that man, it's kind of like any town you're dealing with that has like 30,000 or less people, which
Mm-hmm.
might seem big to some people, you know what I mean? But
Right.
usually a town, I mean, sometimes one of the towns I'm in, man, has 7,000 people. That's it. You know what I
Wow.
mean? So I mean, so anyway. That's small town Indiana. Everybody knows everybody. There's like one Walmart. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
two McDonald's, two burgers. That's small town Indiana. Everything is real small. You can't do anything without somebody knowing. Like every time you go out. Okay, a friend of mine had moved here from New York.
Wow.
Um,
Okay. New York,
right,
right to
and
Marion,
then
Indiana. That's
yeah,
amazing.
right to Marion, Indiana, and she was here, man. Like I think 3 or 4 months,
Right.
and she couldn't wrap her mind around that. Everywhere she went, somebody knew who she was because in New York, you know what I'm saying. The chances of you seeing somebody in New York on accident are slim. But in Indiana, like small town Indiana and Marion, Indiana, like I could leave my house right now and go to Walmart, and I could probably see 5 people I know, guaranteed.
Wow.
Everywhere you go, you're gonna see somebody you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even you don't
That's a
have to be
scary
famous for
thought.
that.
That's a scary thought especially for people come from the city. I can attest to that because I grew up in
Yeah.
Bangkok.
Yeah.
Bangkok has around we're looking at around just over 15, 20 million people. And that's not
Yeah.
including like the greater metropolitan area, And so for me, the
Yeah.
first time I ever got to experience rural Indiana, period, because I'd had just flown in from San Francisco. Yeah, that's where my mom's extended family is, right? The Bay Area. That's why you see the
Hmm.
Warriors flag up there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but flying in from Chicago and flying in from San Francisco. One, the Midwest is already different from anywhere else in the U.S. You know, it's not quite north, it's not quite south, but yet California and New York will see us like the South. You know, it's just like
Yeah.
they all have my family. They give me crap for it all the time. Like, hey, why are you out in Indiana? Like nothing. And it pains me whenever someone says it's a flyover state. Now, I didn't initially think that, right?
Yeah.
Especially winters, dude. Like coming from a country that's 90% humidity, like that's
Yeah.
always you're looking at 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 90, upper 80s, upper 90s, upper hundreds all the time, right? And then you come to
That's
Indiana
crazy, man.
and it's just flat. One,
Yeah.
it's flat. And then when I'm driving out to me and my mom, we're driving out to Taylor, a couple of it's 26 minutes away from Iowa, right?
Yeah.
Just the fact that it was so you could see. You go off the highway and it's just like cornfields and grass for miles and miles around. Now I realize not every small town is like that. You know, it's hills and
Right.
whatnot, but the feeling of what you're saying, um one Walmart, one
Yeah.
Myers. Oh, hey, guess
Yeah.
what? If you're lucky, maybe a Chick-fil-A. You know, it's just like whoa, like
Yeah.
just this is it out here, and you know, just the kind of bubble. To me, it felt so weird. The first night I spent in Indiana, I spent it at the Best Western right by the Cracker Barrel,
Yep. Yep.
right
Yep.
off
Yep.
89. I remember
Yeah.
just looking out into the parking. I'm like, this might as well be Mars right now.
Hey, bro.
Especially
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
for real, and especially in winter. You know, the
Yeah.
roads or certain stretches of the country. To me, it's beautiful now. But
Hmm.
and I say all this to reiterate how cool it is that someone like you and other business owners like you, they're slowly are bringing innovation. And not to say that small towns need innovation to
Yeah.
to improve or not, but I just think it's a cool idea that you're trying to empower the people in this specific technological way.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I mean, so like most of the small town in Indiana were really reliant
Hmm.
on like the industrial side of things, like the factories, like RCA, Dana, Chrysler,
Hmm.
GM. And I mean, obviously Chrysler and GM is still open, but a lot of those other factories closed down, man. And we never really moved on to the next wave. Like, so you say you spend most of your time in the Bay Area. There's all kind of
Oh
technological stuff,
man, like
you know.
it's
So
it's an unfair comparison. Like even
yeah,
even to a
man.
city like Chicago, even Chicago kind of pales in comparison to
Yeah,
like the Bay Area or maybe even Tokyo if you've ever been before. It's just
yeah,
like
man. So like technology, man, like is not like a big boom thing around here. So
mhm.
like anything that you do check like technological wise to bring to small town Indiana would really be a great idea. And that's why I tell everybody, man, is like we gotta get on the technology around this area to really move into the next era, you know? You
but
know, yeah.
but in doing so, have you found like the reception to be because scooters in particular. I don't know what it is with scooters and the older generation, but it's kind of in a way I feel like a lot you know where I'm about to
Yeah,
go with
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Have you felt the pressure at all from kind of certain communities where like this doesn't belong, not necessarily because you're a black business owner or anything like that. It's just
Mhm.
because the mechanism in it of itself and the way that you're doing it, and scooters in general can be seen by a lot of people as like oh man, I've even seen it in the Bay Area. People like this is a disgrace. Like people are gonna kill each other. It's just like
Yeah.
so. Yeah, I can
It's
imagine
about
you've been at the receiving end of a lot of that in the past year,
I would like to say, man, there's a vocal minority.
but
So
very
that
loud
means
one.
like, yeah, man, very loud vocal minority, but it's not the majority of people, man. The
Sure.
majority of people in every city, I mean, really love the service, you know what I mean, and really enjoy what's going on. But with every innovation, man, there comes some kind of pushback. Like I mean, one of my best things I like to say is, whenever you a trailblazer, whenever you blazing trails, there's gonna be dust. You can't blaze a trail without dust coming.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So that's just that's what happens, man. Sometimes when you're blazing new trails and creating new things, there's going to be some dust and some friction that comes with it. So that's just a part of the game, man. So, but as far as like the support, there's definitely a vocal minority, but a very, very, very supportive majority, man, that's really
Hmm.
down for the cause and understand what it is and super excited to have the innovation in their city.
Right. Ironically, I think you'd be met with more pushback in a major city than you would in a small town. Right? Because
Yeah.
like in a
Yep.
big city, it really is a hazard. Like, yeah, there are that many
Yeah.
cars, and me coming from Bangkok, there's way too many mopeds already. Morrell Scooters in Bangkok would be a godsend, but it would also be just a your life would be even more interesting than it is today. Like I find that it's a cool juxtaposition, the fact that in a small
Mhm.
town you're able to not to say you're able to control where it goes as much, but you're able to see just like how useful it is as compared to
Right.
like the city where they have so many different options. And
Right.
hopefully do you feel like in a way this will catapult growth to the area in terms of, could this eventually lead to, say, maybe a subway being built out there,
Yeah.
as kind of far-fetched as that seems, or,
Right.
people being dependent on
Um.
cars, is
Yeah. I mean, so the industry, the micromobility industry, man, is really, so there's different tiers, right?
right.
So the scooters, it's all falls under the micromobility. So scooters are really meant to serve 3 miles and under.
Gotcha.
So any travel you need to do is 3 miles and under. Then the next level is like e-bikes or like electric assist bikes or normal pedal bikes, and that's meant to service like 3 to 6 miles. That's
Mm-hmm.
people are comfortable doing that on bicycles. Then the next thing up is like Uber, like rideshare. That's meant to cover 6 to 15 miles,
Mm-hmm.
and then 15 miles and up is when what people would recommend. That's um, you would do like Turo or like rent a car. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, this is a long way from happening. It might not ever happen, but they're really trying to tackle the whole idea that everybody feels like they need to own a vehicle.
Right.
Because, like for instance, your car will sit is going to sit 95% of its life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sit in the parking spot. You know what I mean, taking up space, leaving a big carbon footprint. And guzzling gas. So shout out Tesla. They're doing a good job of trying to get rid of that part of it. But still, you can have a brand new Tesla that's going to sit in a parking spot for 95. So, like for example, say you go to work in the morning, you start your car, and most people's average work commute is like 40 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of stretching for some people. All right, so let's say you get up in the morning, drive for 40 minutes, your car is going to sit there for 8 hours, then you go drive back home for 40 minutes again, and your car is going to sit there for the rest of the night into the next day. So that means out of 24 hours, you drove an hour and 20 minutes. You know what I mean? For a car that you're paying, most people's payments. So like say for a car you're paying $400 a month for, then
Mm-hmm.
$200 a month for insurance, and then in gas. So like you're only using it for 2 hours a day.
Right.
Yeah, that's the whole
Well,
industry breakdown. Yeah.
Well, no, I like part of the reason I salivate at the idea of having Morrell Scooters in my area is because I am one of those individuals that doesn't have a car. I
Yeah.
ever since being in America, I driven absolutely, in Thailand,
Right.
do have a license, but it's like I haven't being financially independent and being independent away from family. I haven't
Yeah.
really had the opportunity. I'm getting there now. Like probably
Yeah.
later this year, I'm gonna shell out for one. But it's just in the back of my mind, I'm thinking if I don't have to drive again. Now this is me coming from a country where it's dangerous to drive. Like they don't let kids
Yeah.
drive. They don't let kids learn how to drive until at least 18.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, that right there to me, when I first came to the States, the fact that so many teenagers were driving actually freaked me out. Like,
Wow.
especially the kids that I manage now at the workplace that I work at. It's just like,
Yeah.
these kids are empowered in so many different ways I never got to be,
Right.
But what you're
Uh-huh.
saying about mobility, that's an eye opener for me. That's an eye opener, I think, for anybody who's listening that doesn't really know the scale of how it works, and how, like, especially a place like Indiana, where I've always kind of thought, we would benefit from having like a train system that went between Fort Wayne, Hartford City,
Yeah.
Marion, Indianapolis, uh, for, different parts of the state. I feel like it
Right.
would so benefit from that. But stuff like that, what you just said about the what was it called, the circle of mobility or the
Micro mobility.
micro mobility, like
Yeah.
stuff like that doesn't happen without the logistics, without like
Right.
growth, and without the things that you're doing right now to lead to that. And I feel like for a state like Indiana, there's obviously going to be a lot of pushback to keep it traditional. People out here do love their
Definitely. Yeah.
cars. People out here love their Indy 500 as they
Right.
should. I'm not knocking it, but like it's small steps like this that really are amazing to see in small communities.
Yeah. Yes, man. I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where we'll actually, eradicate the idea of everybody feeling like they need to own a car.
Oh no, never,
But
never. I don't think
it's
so.
yeah, but I mean, it's the services that you're getting at, that are developing rather, um, are getting to the point where it makes sense. Like, man, maybe we don't need 2 cars, maybe we don't need 3 cars,
Hmm.
because if I'm only going a mile away, I can ride a scooter. If I'm going 3 miles, I can ride a bike.
Hmm.
If I'm going 5 miles, I can really get an Uber. If it's wintertime and I don't want to ride a scooter or a bike, I can just do an Uber. So it's all this kind of stuff that is way cheaper than you actually
Hmm.
having to pay for a car, do the maintenance on the car, all the other stuff that comes on the car. License plate. Man, one of my cars, man,
Hmm.
I had to get like your yearly license plate renewal was like $500, man. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, some of the expenses that come with a car, man, are insane. But yeah, man. So like for my goal is what I'm realizing is most of the city. Okay, for example, Marion is only 7 miles long anyway. The whole city is only 7 miles long. So with micromobility, you can get anywhere in the whole entire city, really. And that's really one of my goals, man. That's why I'm really focusing on cities that are smaller because like, I'm showing that
Hmm.
people they can use their whole life within that city for micromobility.
Gotcha.
Uh, so that's my goal with that, man.
What do you? I guess the other side of this is, how do you prioritize safety while using your scooters? You as a business owner, how especially with this type of transportation, it can, if you're not careful, it can. I could see. I mean, we've seen how it can lead to some really really bad accidents. So
Yeah,
how do you go about kind of enforcing? Because in a small town, you get the chance to really really make sure, much more so than a big city where it's so much of it is out of your hands. How
right.
how are you how are you day to day kind of prioritizing safety, and like to
Yeah, man.
someone who's
So
nervous about using a scooter, like how would you encourage them that, hey, this is actually pretty safe, or like how, if you would go about recommend not using it if they had like a certain kind of condition or whatnot.
yeah. So first of all, man, Morrell Scooters, man, our number one priority is safety, man. That I think that what people have realized in the bigger cities is there's been a lot of accidents. So we do a couple of things to really uh, scale that down. Well, first of
Hmm.
all, we require everybody to wear helmets. That's in our laws and what everybody agrees to do. Now, whether they do it or not, that's on them. But
Hmm.
everybody has to wear a helmet. And what we do is we don't flood cities with scooters. So if you mention any of the big
Mm.
cities, there's thousands of scooters everywhere. So what that does is create traffic jams, and you'll see them laying on the side of the street, in the
Mm.
rivers, and all kind of crazy stuff. So we make people wear helmets. We control the amount of scooters that are in the cities, and we really scale that down. And then we also, man, we have a new scooter model now, man, that really is robust, man. That is like it's not as fast as some of the other scooters that we've had before,
Hmm.
but what it does, it allows you to have a really safe ride. You're not going to be flying, but what you're going to do is you're going to get to where you need to get to go. You need to go at a good speed, but also very safe. And
Hmm.
that's our whole goal in this. So now, thankfully, in the year, thank the Lord for this. In the year and a half we operated, there's been no accidents, no reports or anything like that. So
Nice.
I want thank him for the
Congratulations,
Lord's
man.
favor on that. Yeah, man, I want that to keep going.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, man, so it's just really encouraging people to be safe and just um, I mean, most of the time the accidents that happen in scooters are people um, running into cars because they can't see or something. So the scooters we have now has 360 lights, so you can see them from all the way around. And yeah, man, so we're doing everything we can to prevent accidents. Now, again, thank the Lord we haven't had any accidents, but sometimes, no matter what, accidents happen in cars. People have accidents in cars all the time. So no matter what industry you're in, there are going to be accidents. But it's just trying to mitigate those accidents and prevent them from being like wildfire.
Right. You kind of touched on something interesting about how cities or certain areas they tend to flood the area with scooters. Do you feel like that's kind of in some way contributed to the somewhat negative connotation of scooters as far as especially in the past 5 years, especially a city like Los Angeles, for example, or Chicago, where we have seen just scooters bombard the market. That's got to be a little bit tough for you to figure out as far as, hey, like how many scooters can I put in this city or in this area? Or is that something
Yeah,
you're actively thinking about all the time? Is that something you're like actively trying to manage to be sure it doesn't bombard?
right,
Because I'd imagine it's hard to do that and then at the same time trying to foster the growth of that, the just
right.
managing all of it, the safety of it, and then just like the growth of it all in one basket. How do you go about
So,
kind of doing that?
um, honestly, when I first started, man, I didn't know anything about anything, so it was just random, man. I just put scooters wherever, and hopefully it
Hmm.
worked out. But now I usually try to use a method as one scooter per 1,000 people that the city has.
Okay.
So, like, if um, Marion has 25,000 people, I try to put 25 scooters. Gas City has 7,000. I try to put 7 scooters. So that's usually the method of attack I go for. Then I run it for a month, and then I'll see how that goes. If I need to pull back some or scale up some, then I
Hmm.
then I'll go with that.
What's the wildest place that you've ever found a scooter?
Oh man,
'Cause
in Meyer, the grocery store.
in Meyer, like in
Yeah,
the
man.
shop.
Yeah,
Oh
somebody stole
no.
one, man. Was put it inside Meyer, and obviously I can see where they are all the time. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Somebody stole one and put it inside Meyer, and I'm going to get it. I'm like, man, there's no way this scooter, because it tells me where it's at. And I'm looking like there got to be a mistake. Like the GPS has to be broke. And I'm
Hmm.
like, man, what's going on? So then I pull up, man. Sure enough, man, it's in Meyer, man.
What was the reception like as far as you going in? I mean, they probably, I don't know if they knew that you were the owner of the business. Is kind of like that stuff like
Yeah,
that probably is. Do you does it ever get challenging to maintain that as far as like the kind of 1 to 2 times that it has been in a totally random place, or people have tried to steal it before? How do you overcome
right.
those challenges as a young business?
Man, it's just really you got to push through it, man.
Hmm.
Like, so okay, some of the bigger businesses, they can take some L's on scooters. Like, oh, one is stolen, oh well, we just let it go, or 10 are
Right.
stolen, we let it go. But me as a small businessman, every
Every
scooter
last
that
one counts.
I feel,
Yeah.
yeah, I feel every one of them, man. So it's like no matter where it's at, I got to go try to get it and make it work.
Hmm.
So it's just knowing that, man, and pushing through it. So like now, thankfully, man, I have a team of people who manage each city, man, and people, and one other person underneath me who manages those people who manage the cities. So we've been this year, man, it's been great so far. For the month we've been out, there's been
Hmm.
no accidents, nothing stolen. People just really enjoying the scooters for what they are, and the team is doing really well, maintaining things and keeping our standards high. And another thing that I did is different. Back to the safety thing, man, is each one of my employees inspects the scooters every day. Because since we have a smaller amount of scooters, they go through a checklist every single day and inspect each scooter to
Wow.
make sure it's running. And that's something like the bigger companies can't do because they're
Because
coming to
it's too
Indianapolis and they're
much.
dropping
Right.
off 2,000 scooters. They're not about to look at all of they're not about to look at all
Right.
of them.
Hmm.
So yeah, man. So it's a challenge, man. It's a constant growth thing. One of the things that I've learned the most, man, is um, you have to be willing to have help, man. Because at
Hmm.
first I was trying to do everything by myself, and I heard somebody say, man, that if you want to go, uh, I don't want to mess it up. If you want to go fast, you can go alone. But if you want to go far, you need people. You need a team, man. So I'm in this for the
Absolutely.
long haul, man. So I had to build a team and really hoping that we can make this thing last for a long time. Really change the cultures of a lot of these cities.
So, do you with what was it like learning that for the first time, especially with the scooters? Because I'd imagine, up until now, like you said, like we've said before, like we've established, like you were a dedicated musician. At what
Yeah,
point, like, I can't imagine the feeling of, I can't. But what was it like learning how to maintain these scooters? Like you became a mechanic, you became an engineer, you became a a practitioner, a logist. the
Yeah.
logistics of it, all of that jumbled into the first few months of service, and where you said you were doing everything by yourself. Like, what were some of
Right.
the biggest challenges of this? Like, learning
Man,
how
there was
to do it.
a lot of YouTube, man. Just sitting there
Really?
watching YouTube, learning how to work on stuff, man. So what a lot of the instructions, since these are made in China, a lot of the instructions are in Chinese. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I can't read Chinese, so then you have to go on YouTube, man, and just watch the videos, which are also in Chinese, but you just have to just follow the instructions.
Wow.
So that's just spent a lot of time watching that, man. So that's how I got the mechanic stuff. But as
Mm-hmm.
far as like the business side, going to like logistics and all that kind of stuff, as a musician, man, I think that's what a lot of musicians need to realize. Each musician, you're a business owner. You just own the business you own is yourself. So you got to be able to promote yourself. So I always had the entrepreneurship in me from being like a musician. I owned a few businesses growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lawn care business through high school and the first couple of years of college. So I always had entrepreneurship in me. But as far as the transition from music into like this business was really smooth because you have to be you have to be an entrepreneur, you have to be a hustler to really make it in the music game.
Mm.
So it's really the same thing, man. You're just switching products.
I love that, because especially with drums, right? You're always tinkering. You're always changing heads. Especially if you went
Yeah.
to high school or middle school playing drums. Odds are the drums at your school weren't that great, so you had
Right.
to take it on yourself to, like, hey, you kind of beg with the teacher, hey, like, if I bring in a head, like, can I change it? Are you
Yeah.
gonna make a whole lot of it? I just like the
Right.
beauty that is what you used to do, kind of transitioning into what you do now. I think that's one of the coolest things about what you're doing, is the fact that I can still see the energy, and I can still see
Yeah.
like the learning, because you're learning, especially as a business owner, you're learning every day. What's some of the biggest, especially especially in the year we've just had. I mean, what a
Right.
year to start a business, one, right? But what's that been like as far as the learning curve, and especially in the year that we've just had, and like the
Man.
unprecedented, that would have crushed so many other businesses. It seems like you've grown
Right.
despite it,
I would say, man, the biggest thing I learned is patience, man. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those people that tend to make like really quick and impulsive decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and that's normally never the right thing in business. Somebody gave me some advice one time, man, that if you're about to make it a business decision, wait 3 days and then come back to the decision and make it again. If you're still gonna be the same decision, that's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I've learned that, man, is patience, man. I messed myself up a few times trying to rush, trying to be in a hurry, you know what I mean? But now, um, as I matured personally and matured in owning a business and owning a business, I realized, man, that their success is tied up in being able to be patient, man.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that doesn't mean be slow. There's a difference, you know. That doesn't mean just be lax today. It's going to take your time, but patience is more so like knowing how to make the right decisions
Mm-hmm.
in the appropriate amount of time, you know, because there is a window where you can wait too long and you miss your you miss your shot, you
Right.
know. But really, just trying to make mature decisions, man. I think that's what helped me through 2020, and also is kind of propelling me through 2021. It's just learning how to be able to be patient, man, and make the right decisions. And and for me personally, I trust God to work things out.
So in as we're trying to wrap up here, like, I think it's the other encouraging aspect of your story is the fact that you've been able to turn around, like turn something that you initially thought was your all. You like you said, you spent from the from age 5 to about
Yeah,
23. It's just like your whole life, this one thing. And for a lot of people, they have a lot of trouble realizing other aspects of their life and growing, because odds are most of us, especially the kids that I manage at my work, I work in the back room at a grocery store currently, lowest tier manager, but I manage a lot of kids, a lot of teenagers. And a lot of people have this fixated idea of, I want this career, I want this goal, and I want this thing. But sometimes, a lot of the times, it won't work out,
yeah.
And so, how do you, what kind of advice do you have for people just trying to find their way in life, their path, their career, their calling, and what are some of the biggest things you have to do in order to find success in that area?
Um,
Not just in success in their craft per se, but just the flexibility that you've been able to have, I think it's encouraging for people. And so what are the biggest things you've learned in that regard?
Yeah, man. To wrap that up, I would say, man, don't be afraid to pivot, man.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the biggest things, put your pride aside, man. It's like sometimes you have to realize, this is not the best thing right now. I gotta move on and try something else. But don't be afraid to pivot, man. Don't let your pride stop you from transitioning to something that's gonna be better for you. Because especially as men, sometimes we get stuck in some way. It's like,
Right.
and we ain't changing no matter what. You get to drive in a certain direction. You're going the wrong way, but you just gonna keep going, and hopefully you make it back. So a lot of people get really
Yeah.
stubborn like that. So I would always say, man, don't be afraid to pivot, man, and put your pride aside, man, and really, uh, I really think that me
Hmm.
trusting it. What I always advise people to do, man, is trusting in God, man, and he'll make that way for you, make it clear.
Well, Ronnie, it's been, and just like that, you've done a whole hour.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for bearing with us, and coming on and spending your time today. How can we find your company, Morrell Scooters, and what cities are you in right now? And like, just kind of
Yeah,
give one
man.
last plug out
So
for
yeah,
you.
man, follow us on Facebook at Morrell Scooters, on Instagram at Morrell underscore Scooter. You can follow me on Facebook at Ronald Morrell Jr. Follow me on Instagram at Ron underscore Morrell. You can find us in the cities, man. You can find us in Marion, Indiana,
Hmm.
Gas City, Indiana, Wabash, Indiana, Warsaw, Indiana, and Winona Lake, Indiana. So we're coming to those are places we're at right now. We'll be coming to some new places, hopefully by the end of the year.
My man's diversifying in his business. This is so
Yeah.
cool. Well, guys, that's been the Crunchy Take podcast for this week. Be sure to check your online forums for any further updates from me. Any platform of your choosing, you can listen to us. And thanks for dropping by. We'll see you next episode.